and welcome to the Miss Sayé show. Today, I have the lovely Reza Aslan with me. He's an author, he's an Emmy nominee for his producing in Hollywood, and he is joining us from Los Angeles, correct?
That's right, Los Angeles, the east side of LA.
Well, welcome to the show. Thank you so much. And these are just the titles because Reza is beyond his titles. Every time I try to catch up with him, I see that you have reinvented yourself and you're doing new things. And I would love to hear about your new TV show.
Yeah, thank you. So it was just announced quite recently. The show is called The United States of Al. It's a half-hour sitcom on CBS. It premieres April 1st, Thursdays at 9:30 p.m. It's a Chuck Lorre production. Chuck Lorre, of course, is kind of a god when it comes to sitcoms. He Big
Sure.
Bang Theory and Dharma and Greg and Mom and Young Sheldon and the Kaminsky Method, and I mean it's just he's an institution. So it was really wonderful that this idea that we had was something that he was drawn to. It tells the story of a Afghan interpreter who comes to the United States after years of trying. It's that part is very much based on the real events. So there are some 50,000 Afghan interpreters that the United States military used and promised that in exchange for helping them in the war in Afghanistan, that they would get visas to come to the United States. That promise, of course, was never kept. There are something like anywhere unofficially about 50,000 Afghan interpreters who risk not only their lives, but the lives of their family
Sure.
to fight the Taliban alongside US forces and who have been abandoned in Afghanistan. This is the story of one of them who finally gets to come to the US, and he lives with a Marine who was kind of his closest friend there. And it's about the relationship between the two of them and the way in which he's still being an interpreter for this Marine, but he's now interpreting his life, helping him get his life back together again and fix his marriage and, deal with the trauma of war. And there's never really been a show like this on television. Certainly there's never been a character
Sure.
like Al on
Sure.
television, the lead actor,
Exactly.
being representing an Afghan. And it's funny and it's warm and it's beautiful, and it's really meant to target, I think, the middle of the country for whom they
Hmm.
may have never known a Muslim or a brown person, and have views about Afghans especially and the war. And this is kind of a way of changing their perceptions. I'm
Of
really
course.
excited about it.
I am excited about it too because, as a Middle Eastern actress, just seeing that, thank you for creating projects like that to be able to shift. This is a huge shift
Yeah,
to have a leading character as an Afghan person in a show, in a sitcom.
yeah,
That's
that's right.
incredible. That's
Yeah.
it. That's if I see us evolving in Hollywood.
Yeah, yeah. And but it's not just, by the way, we have, so his mother, his sister, his brother, and his cousin are all regulars. Now we will meet them, via Skype. They're still in Afghanistan. His family's still in Afghanistan. But it's very exciting because that's five, characters,
That's incredible.
who are, four of them are themselves Afghan Americans,
Mhm.
and it's just kind of, it's really exciting. And the writers too. That's the other thing that's really remarkable, is that we were able to hire four writers who were Afghans, for the writers' room. That's unheard of too.
Beautiful.
Um, and then we have an Afghan writer's assistant and an Afghan, production assistant, and we have Afghans who are doing costume design, and we have
Sure.
Afghans who are doing the music, and we have Afghans who are like, we just wanted to make sure that, in Hollywood, we talk a lot about diversity and the
Right.
importance of diversity, but
Right.
oftentimes that only means in front of the camera.
Right.
But,
Right.
we were committed to making sure that diversity was also reflected behind the camera.
Sure. Well, I'm super excited about it. I just love seeing this change. And so you said April 1st. That's when they're
April 1st,
on.
9:30 on Thursdays, United States of Al.
Oh, we're very excited to watch it. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I also see your best-selling book right behind you, Zealot.
Yeah, this, just in case anybody forgets.
No, we
Poster
don't.
of it behind me.
I don't think anybody would forget. So, would you like to talk to us about that a little bit? Since you wrote that book, has your point of view shifted? Do you still, how do you feel about that book now, years looking back?
It is funny because I guess that was in 2013, and uh, ever since the pandemic, time has just become a construct. I don't even, it's hard to even know where we are, what day it is, what month it is, what year it is. I've lost complete track of
I
it.
hear you.
But no, I mean, I think, I'm very proud of that book, and I'm very proud of the conversations that it launched.
Mhm.
It was obviously very successful here in the United States, but it was a bestseller in half a dozen countries, and in countries that you wouldn't expect. Like, it was a bestseller in India, and it was a bestseller in Brazil. So one's a heavily Catholic country, and one is a Hindu country. And I think it just goes to show that people are very interested in Jesus as a person, over and beyond what he's come to represent. But I think for me, it's a book that I really spent 20 years working on.
Mm.
Most of my career was just kind of focused on one day writing this book, and so it's very satisfying to see how well it did. That said, I kind of, it also represented a bit of a turning point for me. The last book that I wrote was in 2017. It came out in 2017, called God: A Human History. And that's probably the last religion book that I'm going to write.
Mm.
So my next book is a biography. It has religious themes to it, but it's a straight biography. And I'm going to start writing, other things, television, films. I feel like I've said what I wanted to say in the field of religious history. Once you write a book called God, you're done. Like, what
You
am I
can
going to do
have
after
God
that? Yeah. I
point
wrote a
you.
book about
Oh,
Jesus, and I wrote a book about God. I'm done. Um, I wrote a book about
true that.
Muhammad. That's it. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I'm excited about, you kind of said it in the introduction. I like to reinvent
Reinvent.
myself and
I can see that. I can
do
see
new
that. And
things.
you're very creative, Reza. Like you are, some people, writers are not necessarily could be on stage, but you
Mm.
also do well on stage. Like I watch your TEDx with your wife. I was cracking up. You guys are so funny together. And
Yeah,
you have a
star.
stage presence. You're a great speaker. So I think that's why you're like multi-dimensional. So
Mm.
that's why I wanted to ask you, are you going to make a screen appearance for the new show?
Not for that one.
No?
I was the show that I've been working on over the last couple of years is a show called Rough Draft, and it's basically
Yes.
it's
Love
a
it.
it's a talk show about writers for writers,
Love it.
essentially. And I really enjoyed doing it. Unfortunately, the pandemic kept us from doing a second season. We tried to do a couple of shows via Zoom, and
You couldn't drink
people,
together.
yeah, for people who are unfamiliar with the show, it takes place literally inside of a bar.
Right.
It takes place at the bar. We're sitting on bar stools at the bar, and everyone else is kind of around us. And the whole point of it is that we're drinking and talking about writing and the creative life. You
Mm.
can't recreate that like this. This doesn't work.
I know.
So, hopefully, once things are cleared, we can go back and do some more episodes, because I love doing it. And I love talking to creative people about the writer's life, the creative life. Like, what's it like? I think a lot of people are very curious about what does it mean to live the life of the mind.
Right. I
And
remember you saying something that if you treat writing as a job, you'll get it done. You
yeah,
have to treat it like a job, like You
Yeah.
set your alarm, you sit down and you write. You don't say, oh, I have a writer's block. I
Yes,
cannot write. I
exactly.
need a muse. It's just like, get it done, like start writing. I love
Exactly.
that, what
Yeah,
you
yeah.
said.
It's probably the thing that I say most to my students is that, yeah, if you don't treat writing like a job, it'll never be your job. Um, and I do think that, yeah, we do have very romantic ideas about writing and what writers do.
Yes.
And what writers do is they sit down and write. That's what writers do. And, it's there's not a lot of romance in it. It's actually
I
kind of lonely.
Yeah, but I picked up a couple of good things from that rough draft. I am not necessarily a writer, but I picked up lots of good advice. And I love the conversations. They're very open, they're very raw, and it's very joyful thing to watch. So I hope that you guys bringing it back for second
Yeah.
season. One thing I was told that when you meet someone or in general, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion. And when I met you, these are two things you start talking about.
It's
So,
like it's the only two things I talk about.
so you kind of just like from right off the bat broke all the rules and you're like, bring it on. So I
Yeah.
love that. I love that.
Well, I'll tell you what, it creates a lot of enemies, but these are my whole the philosophy that I have is that politics and religion are identity markers, right? That when someone says that I'm Democrat or Republican or conservative or
Sure,
liberal, or
sure.
when someone says I'm Christian or Muslim or Jewish, they're not telling you what they believe. They're telling you who they are, how they understand their very sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are told like don't talk about those things, you're basically saying don't talk about how I define myself. you
Mm-hmm.
know that can only take you so far. Okay, what are your favorite television shows? All right.
How's the weather?
What books do you like to read? Those are interesting, but they don't tell me like who you are.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about religion, when we talk about politics, it may get ugly, but at least we're now talking about who we are as human beings.
Sure, some real talk instead of what's your favorite color. I hear you. And it's courageous. And maybe that's why it gets tense because people think they identity being attacked if you're not agreeing or if you have a different point of view, not necessarily agreeing. So that's why they come at you really hard. But so I was inspired by you because I find it very courageous that you talk about it. But of course, that's the area that you have studied. You have invested your life. So where you are right now, I know you're not going to write any more books on religion, but what is your perspective on religion as a global citizen right now?
I think that's a very good question. I do think that religion is still a very powerful phenomenon. And I do think that sometimes, when you're a progressive like I am, and when you live in Los Angeles, in the United States, you're around people who often don't take religion very seriously. And so you start to, have this mistaken identity that, well, maybe, religion is a dying force. It's not really important anymore. But the opposite is actually true, that religion is an ever greater force in the world, that it's becoming more strongly a marker of identity. And so, what I always sort of try to tell people is that no matter what you want to do with your life, no matter what you're interested in, it's very important that you become religiously literate, because religion is still how the vast majority of the population of this planet identifies itself. And so, you know, whether you want to be a writer or whether you want to be a doctor or whether you want to be an engineer or whether you want to be a diplomat, if you have to be familiar
Sure.
with religion, because it's unavoidable in your encounters with people.
Mm-hmm.
So, I still think it's very important. I still, talk about it and teach it. I'm very proud of the fact that, I've written things that have helped people understand not just specific religions, but more generally what religion is and how to understand it. And I hope that those books continue to have influence. For me, however, I feel like, okay, I've done that. And what I really want to do now is use other platforms and other genres to
Mm-hmm.
continue to change the way that people think, beyond just in religious terms. And this is something that I've been saying for a decade or more. I mean, I could write 1,000 zealots, and they could be huge, popular international bestsellers,
Mm-hmm.
and they still will have a fraction of the audience that a popular sitcom will have, you
Sure.
know? So I've done that. Now I want to focus on, a sitcom and
Mm-hmm.
see if I can reach people with the same message that's in my books, but
Sure.
people who wouldn't normally read my books.
Sure. So you're using a different platform to get your message across. If you want to simplify your message, what is your message that you want to get across?
Yeah, and this is, I mean, I know this very clearly because my wife and I have a founding philosophy. It's one that we teach our kids. It's one that brought us together, when we first dated, and it's one that has driven us ever since, which is, don't have a job, have a mission.
Mm,
If you
sure.
have a mission, then there are many ways in order to, get paid for that
Sure.
mission, to make a living off of
Sure.
that mission.
Sure.
But if you have a job, it's just one avenue. People
Mm-hmm.
always say to me, like, you do like 7 different things. You're a professor and you produce TV shows and you write books and you
Mm-hmm.
know, but the truth is that those are just different expressions of
Sure.
this thing, of a single mission. And my mission has always been to use stories to transform the way that people see themselves and others, to use stories to break down the walls that separate us. Now, religion is just storytelling. Politics is just storytelling. That's all it is. Stories are how we understand who we are. It's how we understand where we fit in the world. And this has always been the case. When we were stooped and hairy and living in caves, stories were how we understood the world. Um, and so, I'm a firm believer in the power of stories to change perceptions, to change the world. And so I want to use those stories, fiction, nonfiction, historical, contemporary, whatever the case may be, in order to change the way that people think.
Beautiful.
Sometimes I do it with TV, sometimes I do it with books. It's the same, just different platforms.
I love it. Very much inspiring. You have a focus. You have one mission, but to get to that mission, you have many avenues. You
Exactly.
may write a book. You may have a TV show. You may be a speaker on a TEDx, but you know where you want to go, and you just have different avenues. So each avenue engulf different audience.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Love it. One more question I have that is a little bit towards religion is that the fine line between religion and government, when that gets blurry, how does that impact the need for global citizenry and thinking like a global citizen?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The issue about sort of the role that religion plays in government is not as easy as it sounds, because on the one hand, you want to just simply say, well, religion should have no role in government whatsoever. I mean, that's ridiculous. It can't be good, obviously. And you look at, certain examples like Iran, and you go, well, obviously that's a perfect example of what happens when religion becomes government, and it's garbage. It's a terrible situation.
Right.
And that's absolutely true. The problem, however, is that if we understand religion to be not just things that you believe or rituals that you practice, but a matter of identity, a matter of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And if we truly believe that the best kind of government is a democratic government, a government in which people are free to express themselves and to insert their ideas, their values, their beliefs, their opinions into the crafting of the state, into the government, well, then how do you excise religion from that? Right? Well, then if religion is part of who you are, you can't say you can bring all of yourself into the public sphere except one thing, except your religion. Keep that at home. It doesn't work that way, right? Certainly not in a democracy. That's what Turkey tried for decades, right? You can bring all of yourself, we'll have a democracy, it'll be a democratic state, there'll be elections, there'll be freedoms, but no religion. Religion cannot have any role in this whatsoever. And it didn't work, and now we see, as often happens, right, the sort of snapping to the other side, and now religion is playing way too much of a role, in Turkey. That's what happens. Same is true in France, right? France says, yes, we're a democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of thought, except religion. You can't bring religion into the public sphere. It doesn't work, right? Because what you're saying to your citizens is that all of your opinions matter except for one opinion. Any opinion that involves religion, that we can't have. That to me is the same. Forcing religion out of society is the same as forcing religion into society, right? It's the same. And it's both, equally disastrous. I think what's very important, and this is something that the United States tries, doesn't always succeed, which is that we're a country that encourages the role of religion in the public realm, but has very clear and unambiguous laws protecting non-religious or religious minorities. So does it always work? No, it doesn't always work, right? I mean, many of our laws are predicated on the religious values of Protestants, because the vast majority of Americans are Protestants. And we can say to ourselves, well, that doesn't make any sense because I'm Buddhist. Why should I live under laws that are clearly influenced by Protestant Christianity? Makes perfect sense. Except 70% of Americans are Christian. So if you're in a democracy, by definition, that 70% is going to have enormous influence in the way that we create, our democratic laws. And it's going to be very clearly predicated on the moral views of that 70% because they are more than us. The only way that you save society is to make sure that there is clear, unambiguous constitutional laws saying that, yes, while that is part of democracy and we can't stop it, at the same time, we can't allow any law, any practice to infringe of the rights of the 30%. And it's a delicate balance. And it may not be as neat as simply saying religion shouldn't have a role in government, period. But it's more honest and true and realistic to, how the role of religion and state actually functions.
Well, I love how you call spade a spade. You don't hold anything back. Reza. Thank you for that beautiful explanation. I very much enjoyed it. In honor of your show, Rough Draft, one of my favorite. I love watching it. Tell me what's the best advice you have received and what's the worst advice you have received?
Oh no. These are questions that I force my guests to answer. Okay. Best writing advice I ever received. Well, I kind of, it's a version of what I just said, which is that that writing is a job, right? That I always sort of say, like, the person who works, at McDonald's doesn't wake up and say, the spirit doesn't move me today. I'm not really inspired, to make burgers. So I'm just not going to do it. What? It's your job. You go, it's 9 o'clock, you go and you work. And I was taught, very early on that's the same thing as writing. It's 9 o'clock. It doesn't matter if you don't feel like it. It doesn't matter if you're not inspired. It's 9 o'clock. Sit down. It's time to work. Right? So that's the best advice that I've given, and that's changed a lot of things. Okay, the worst advice that I ever got as a writer, the worst advice I ever got as a writer, I think, was write what you know, which is funny because we say that a lot. It's kind of an old saying in writing: write what you know. But I think it sometimes what it gets understood as is only write about yourself and only write about your own experiences, and don't try to sort of creatively write about, experiences that you don't have. And I think that's terrible advice, right? I mean, it stifles your creativity. Write what you know means use yourself and your feelings, your emotions as a model for how you construct other characters, but don't just write about yourself.
Interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
It's
And I
my
hope to see
pleasure.
more of you and more of your work. We will be looking out for your show April 1st.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reza June. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.